Welcome back. I'm Kim Bailey, she's Fulyana Osborne, and today we're continuing our talk with Nick Plummer about career transitions and the use of outplacement services.
When I was asking some feedback when I was in human resources, and I was asking, or just general management, asking people how did they find this transition process and what if they could pick one or two things that they thought was most helpful. I must admit I've been close to this process from all aspects, and this one surprised me, but I kept it in mind, and that is they said they were helped in the way they would articulate to their family, to their friends, and to afterwards potential employees what to say.
What to say.
And they found that these are very highly intelligent, capable people, helped many, many, many people in their time, and says, now what do I say? It's easy to say restructuring, redundant, those two words, they come up all the time, but why me, why now, and how do I feel about it? And articulating that, I think, was harder for a number of people than them getting the news. And so they found the outplacement services, the coaching, the mentoring, help them do that and get comfortable with the language and the tone in which they can feel human. They get it off, but at the same time they don't impact the other party unnecessarily.
Well, it's rewiring your brain. It's no different to writing a journal and writing down all the bad things that happen in the day, and you keep rereading that, and that just perpetuates nothing's working, and it just festers the wound. But if you stop and you say, all right, well, I'll put that behind me, and today I'm just going to write down the good things, even if you think you've had a bad day, and you've got to only write down the good things that happened today, you'll always be able to find three.
Absolutely.
And then if you do that at the end of the day, it rewires your thinking into, and it's a physiological thing, that it rewires your brain to say, there was some good that came out of that, and that's what I should focus on, because that's the direction I want to be. We don't wake up every morning thinking, how bad can I feel today?
No.
So we've got to train ourselves at the other end of the day to give our brains time to rewire overnight.
But it's the communication thing is really, really important, and I mean, it's, when we first meet the person that's just lost the job, and that will usually be a few minutes after they've lost the job. The most important thing for them is to go out and tell the rest of the world, and that usually means their partner, what's happened. And that's really important. I mean, you have heard terrible stories of where an individual loses a job and doesn't go and tell the partner that they have, and pretends to go back to work. And we'd like to believe that doesn't happen anymore, but it still does happen.
It does happen.
And it is very hard to go back and tell your partner that you've just lost the job, because you feel in some way it was your fault, whether it is or not. And then so we have to, try and encourage individuals to do that and check with them when we see them again that how did that go and what was the reaction of the partner. And then, of course, the next important thing is, what are you going to be telling the market, if you like, which is the search firms and the potential employers in your network, what's happened. And once again, people find it very difficult to say what happened. And our encouragement of them is to say, tell it. Tell exactly what happened. Cast yourself, of course, in the best possible light, but tell the world exactly what happened, because the world will accept it. It's not the end of the world. But it's funny, because we do video interview training with people, and that's pretty important. And one of the very first things we check is what we call the leaving story, which is, what happened to you at X firm and why have you moved on? And often they'll revert straight back to something that is not really what happened at all, and quite frankly the market will know that too. And so you have to bring them back to it to say, well, no, let's just try it again, and let's communicate what did happen. Perhaps it was a parting of the ways between the two of you, the chemistry was not right between you and your boss or whatever. Mutually you decided that you and the organisation mutually decided that you move on, and then they'll start moving gently towards that, because that's what happened, And then, of course, it's what are you going to tell the next door neighbours and family gatherings and things like that. So you're dead right. It's and also we wear our jobs, like it's what when people introduce themselves at parties and things, it's what they do is really important. And when it's, well, I'm not doing anything at the moment, I'm currently unemployed, that's very difficult, you know. So helping them work out what they might say is really important. Yeah.
Interesting that we see that not just in people who lose their jobs for whatever reason, but also in retirees, that their vision of themselves, who they are, is the job that they did or were doing, and they can't move beyond that.
Yeah.
And there's no life beyond that.
That's right.
And that's the approach when it happens. I just want to go back to something you talked about at the beginning of that, was the timing of when you come in with your services.
Yeah.
Almost immediately? Is that always the case?
No, it's not always the case. In an ideal world, we would like to meet the individual, you know, that's affected immediately after they've had the termination meeting.
Yep.
Our belief that that's a sensible thing to do is because that person needs help at that time, but also it helps them move forward because you can give them some guidance on, some reassurance that you're going to be helping them, but also some guidance on the stuff that they might want to do next, like how they speak to their partner and organising for them to come in and meet, you know, us to get them started. So they don't sort of get stuck. But sometimes it's not appropriate to do that. Sometimes organisations would prefer you don't because they just don't feel comfortable doing that. So you'd meet we call a person on a career transition program a candidate because they're a candidate for a job. So we might meet that person later on sometimes. I mean, to be honest, it's not an easy meeting for us either, but we would prefer that we meet them immediately afterwards if at all possible.
Interesting. I've not ever thought of that. In the situations I've been in, the outplacement service people have always been in the room when you get told the news.
Oh, no,
so it's that immediate. It's like, here they all are, I'm firing you, he's going to find you another job, and this person needs you to fill out these forms so we can pay you and see you later.
No, usually we won't be at that meeting, at a meeting immediately afterward.
Nick, tell me a bit about the networking. You mentioned networking, and part of the outplacement, one of the stages is to encourage the candidate to rebuild their network. I had some experience where people who are very, very good at networking, they actually get lost at that time. Yeah. They get lost because they're used to people coming to them because they're in a senior position and things happen around them. They're always meeting and greeting and knowing people. And now they feel they're not in that position. Yeah. They have to actually break their ice. Well, did you come across that?
Yeah, because it's what we were talking about before, Fulyana, is often I think people are embarrassed by the fact that they've lost a job and that they don't want to tell their network that they have. So there's almost a reluctance to network. Right. And of course there's also a lot of people who don't have a very good network as well. And almost everybody thinks they're not a good networker. Which isn't true. Most people are actually pretty good networkers, but most people don't have any belief that they're any good at networking.
Or they don't identify a network.
Yes.
They don't see that the people that they know are ostensibly a network of contacts, regardless of what they do or how you know them. Yes. That there's other parts of their lives that you don't know about that might be useful anyway.
Exactly. And also I think people confuse networking with glad-handing people in pubs and things. That's not networking. I mean, it might be, but it's not. Networking is having a mutual help group where people communicate with each other and they help each other. And most people do that. So most people have a network, But for us, it's really, really important because we keep stats on how people get jobs. Yes. And of the people that come through our doors across Australia, 58% of them get jobs from their network. Yep. Which is a much higher number than all the other sources, like the search firms and advertised jobs and the recruitment firms. They're all much lower stats. So your network is, and how you use it is significantly important to you.
And you would think too that these days at that level, within the network, whether they identify it or not, there's going to be people who've been in the same position. Yes. Who've been through all of this and who knew that this was coming for you anyway because they know what's happening in the industry with one another, all the other companies that are around. So they're not isolated from what has happened. And as you said before, they will know if the story's true or not. So why would you not fall back on that support group, which it is?
Absolutely. Actually, I remember when I was made redundant, which is how I discovered the outplacement industry. And I remember I was a bit embarrassed about it, and I was a bit embarrassed how to tell the next door neighbours, strange enough, because I was going to be at home a lot more, and they'd sort of noticed that you were at home, you know. And I remember finally when I saw one of my neighbours over the fence or something, and I said, "Oh, Rob, by the way, just to let you know that you'll see a bit more of me recently because I've just been made redundant." And I remember his response was, "Yeah, that happened to me a couple of times, and there's this recruitment firm I should introduce you to," and you know, exactly, they're all there for you. And this country is very supportive. It's, you know, because it's been a frontier sort of country, people are very supportive of each other, and the network usually is absolutely there to help. You know?
Yes, and I think what we fear in our minds in those situations is us putting a label on things that isn't necessarily there. You know, we're hiding behind, this might be how these people would react. It's not how I would react, you know, if the situations are reversed, but it might be how they react. So I'll prepare myself for that when we're not really looking at the reality of how these people have been friends for you over years or done things for you and would only want to be seeking the best for you anyway.
Absolutely.
So,
and all your network is just a conduit, really. And all you're looking for from your network is, of course, advice on organisations, but really more so looking for connections to businesses which you're trying to explore. You might not want to work for them, by the way, but you want to find out more about them, and the network can do that so easily. Yes. And now, of course, you've got LinkedIn as well, which is an extraordinary tool, which, you know, for us and our people, it's just an amazing bit of technology. So in that way, we're using technology.
Yes, and I think that's probably what we should look at in this situation, is that we can use technology. Technology is not going to replace the human services that are available in this area, but it's certainly going to make some of the tasks broader and more useful by using the technology that's available.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
So, for example, on that point, is that I know that going through the outplacement services that you provide is you go through different steps and then you do questionnaires and all of those to find out what you're good at, you know, your strengths and weaknesses, but then what's most natural to you, dealing with people, being a researcher in a back office, etc. That part you can do online.
You can. I mean, although it's interesting what you're saying, Fulyana, but I mean, we look upon that, we call that career insight here. Yes. So it's a career evaluation, process. We think that that's probably the most important part of outplacement, really, because it's a very important thing for you to define the job and the career that you're looking for. Yeah. Because, if there's an opportunity in losing a job, it's that you move into something that's going to work better for you over the next period. Now, we use technology to do that a lot. You're quite right. So you use very good online tools nowadays to do that. Mostly American tools. Yeah. Although the tools come from all over the world, we mainly use American tools. The important thing is the conversations that come out of them. So it's the information you see that's come out of the tool and the conversation between the consultant and the candidate that will open up things, really. So that's where we need good, you could call them coaching skills, but I'd probably call them counselling skills more, really. So that's a really important part of what we do.
Yeah, that's really important, because I could go and fill it online, and then what?
Yes,
I mean, if I was doing it all by myself, and I'm in that situation, then what do I do with that information? It can even be more confusing to me that all my life I was doing A, and this says I'm suitable for B, and I haven't done any B, and that's when the consultant is really the counsellor consultant, if you like, is crucial in that process.
That's right. So it's a process, and it needs time as well. You know, now that time is going to be dependent. It's the more senior the role in many ways, the longer the period of time, because the person has perhaps taken that role even more seriously. But it's a process where you give some structure to the individual so they can explore various things, but you allow them and encourage them interaction with other people beyond you who can act as sounding boards for them, and then they need the time to think it through. And often that time will change things as well, you know. And again, I can think of an example of a fascinating guy that I worked with once who was a very high-powered individual that came out of a well-known Australian company, and he should have been the managing director of this company, but he didn't get that role. Wrong choice, actually, but anyway, never mind. Now, before I started working with him before he finished up in the firm, and he was very clear in his own mind that he wanted to go back to another really senior role. There was one more really senior role in him, and then he moved towards portfolio, which he'd get easily, boards and things like that. And then he went away for a long holiday with his wife, when he actually finished up, and they had a really good holiday. And perhaps for the first time for a long time, he smelled the roses.
Yes.
And he came back and said, complete change of plan, Nick. I'm going to go straight to portfolio. So, time can change things as well. And it was a right move for him as well. He ended up with a really good portfolio, which he's still doing now.
I just want to reinforce the story about filling out the paperwork online.
Yeah.
In one of the stages when I was made redundant, the outplacement service said, well, we've got this survey we need you to fill out, do this. And you don't know this, Nick, but I trained originally as an architect, and then I worked in human resources, and this was at the end of the human resources period, but not with the government, with a private company. And the survey that I filled out suggested that I should become a hairdresser. And I just didn't see that was in my career. I was coming out of a stage where I was tired of people, I have to say, in the human resources area, and I didn't really want to work with people anymore, and I didn't see how being a hairdresser was going to help me with that goal. So I didn't take that up, and I did need to talk to someone about the results and why it was producing that result, and perhaps that some of the answers weren't being assessed in quite the right way. So instead I went on to run a lolly shop, but I just don't see how that really came out of that exercise either, but still.
Did you enjoy the lolly shop?
I did. I still have it online. It still runs online, but not face-to-face anymore.
Right.
Okay, so we're getting a picture of, say you come in early in the piece for the outplacement candidate, and then you go through getting to know them, helping them emotional support, then talking about utilising network, giving them examples of percentage of people getting jobs through network, maybe use some tools online to assess what their career might look like.
Yeah.
What else is in that process about recruitment agencies, anything, introductions, forums where they can discuss different topics?
I mean, it depends on the seniority of the candidate in terms of where the next job's going to come from. But obviously, I work with mainly reasonably senior candidates, so the search firms is important for them as well. So, and some of the boutique recruitment firms, or they probably call themselves search firms as well. So to make sure that they do get out and meet them properly. Yes. So we obviously have to know those organisations ourselves. And of course it is difficult to go out and meet them because they're often, what they're primarily interested in is driving their own business, and that doesn't mean interviewing lots of potential candidates. So that's difficult. So we try and sort of put a bit of oil on the cogs to make that work well. It's interesting, your question also said, what about other things that happen in here? Yeah. And we do run little workshops in here. All the work that I do with my candidates, for example, is one-on-one, but there are other things for them to go to here if they want to, and that includes particularly training in research, and that's really important that they know how to do research thoroughly. Training in LinkedIn, how to use LinkedIn, how to set your LinkedIn up properly, all of that sort of stuff. A certain percentage of the people that come through here, not a big percentage actually, but I can't remember what the stats are now, it's about a 5 or 6% start their own business. So we send them on a training module to do that, and then we line them up with a consultant that's had experience in that space, usually starting their own business or something like that.
I'm one of them.
Ah, well, that's right, you are.
And you had referred me on to how to set up an MBN.
Absolutely.
ABN, sorry.
Yes, she's got her own national broadband network, yes.
Not yet.
Yes, Telstra, Optus, Fulyana, and many of you listening to this will understand. That's probably the case.
But also, I forgot to say that, when we meet people, there's usually, after you've just lost a job, there's 3 things in your mind usually. One is, what am I going to do next and how am I going to find it? Well, that's our issue. But there are obviously 2 other issues that people would usually worry about. One of them is, I don't even know financially how I am at the moment. So we also use very good tax accountants to give people advice in that space, not investment advisors,
yes,
but good taxation guys, and they'll usually meet the person and their partner so that they can review things, and we're not privy to those discussions. And the third thing that people can be concerned about is their health and fitness, especially if it's been a very stressful time for them. So again, we'll send people out on medicals, very thorough medicals, just to make sure they're okay, and again, that information is privy to them, but we just make sure it happens and pay for it. Yeah.
So really a holistic approach, rather than
so.
focus on the career and lifestyle.
Yeah.
How, at the end of the process, do you measure success? Apart from just, we got them placed somewhere.
We measure it in two ways. One is we actually do a career plan with the individual at the end of the career insight process. So we've got a plan. So you actually eyeball the plan when you measure the job against the plan. So is this really what you said you were looking for? Is it taking you where you want to go? Usually the answer to that is yes. Sometimes it's not so, because people have decided to step down a bit, and is that acceptable to the individual, blah, blah, blah. But most critically what we do is we survey every individual that goes through here. We get their permission to do it, because it could break privacy, but we get a market research company to survey them, because obviously it wouldn't be appropriate us doing it, because it's difficult to tell somebody you've worked with for 6 months that they didn't do a very good job. So we make it much easier for them to tell exactly what happened. So we survey everybody that comes through here, and the results are really interesting. We're pretty pleased with the general levels of satisfaction. But what is really interesting is what was really important for them as they went through, and it surprises us, but I suppose it should in some ways, that what was most important for them quite often was the relationship they had with the consultant that they worked with.
Yes.
Because they felt that person added huge value to what they were doing, and they really, there was a great appreciation of it. But the other obvious things are, the career evaluation process, help developing resumes, help with networking, training for interviews. Some people find the use of the facility particularly important. There are different things for different people, but
That facility point, it's worth making a bit stronger in that having a base in which to come, use the phone, secretarial services, and a number to give somebody to call you in on other than your mobile number. I think it's keeping that a bit of structure around your life a bit, and I think
a presence.
A presence, and being able to be in a city somewhere where you're going to 3 or 4 interviews and you have time in between.
Absolutely,
that's extremely valuable than tracking off home or hanging around a coffee shop or whatever.
Well, there are those people who believe that outplacement facilities are irrelevant nowadays, and if you're driving technology as a delivery system, which is, you would say that. But we find that, we obviously spend a lot of money on our facility because we have we're in the CBDs in all the cap cities that we're in, and it costs us a lot of money. But what we find is a lot of the candidates get a huge amount out of the facility. Some don't. Some really don't want to come in here that often, and they've set up at home, and they've got their own computers, their own mobiles, and they just want to come in and see the consultant or the researcher, or come to some of the modules or whatever. But other people get huge value out of the office, and mainly they're either because they're great networkers and they use it as a place to perch while they network around the city, or because they've got young family at home and they can come in and get on with some work here, they're not troubled, or they're just that sort of person that needs a routine of an office to go to as well, and that person will come in here every day almost.
Right, well, we're nearing the end of our time, and we do thank Nick for his time and his expertise and sharing his experience. And I have to tell you that he's looking very dapper today. He's worn his tie for the podcast. I promised I said I would say it. So just in wrapping up, Nick, is there anything else that you'd like to tell us on these topics that we've covered today that we haven't already quizzed you on?
No, actually, I think you covered it pretty well. I can't think of anything to add to your question.
Fabulous. Well, thank you for your time today. That's it for today's version of Inside Exec. I'm Kim Bailey. She's Fulyana Osborne, and this is Inside Exec.